Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today, and I have a video here to talk about a question that if you're a comic book fan at all, in any way, whether you love the newer surge of movies that have been around for a little while, or even back to when I was a kid in the 2000s and whatnot, you probably had somebody at some point, family member, cousin, online person, if you have a YouTube channel, a commenter maybe, asking you who you prefer out of the big two, Marvel or DC, if you happen to read those two, because a lot of people go to like the indies nowadays. It's kind of the recommended thing that a lot of people still do because of the pricing of Marvel and DC. But anyway, without getting into pricing, without getting into their shitty practices, without really getting into any of that, I guess this video could be a little bit of everything, that we could talk about with our preferences for this stuff. I would love to see you guys comment in the comments section about what you prefer on this as well. But this is the thing for me. Most of my physical book collection, even down to my digital for that matter, the comics that I have, the trades that I have, the ones that I look forward to the most to read are DC comics. When it comes to the movies, I love the movies. I really do. Not all of them, obviously. I mean, you have shit like Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 84 out there, but like the Zack Snyder trilogy, right? It's not the best ever representation of any of those characters, or the majority of those characters for that matter. But it's currently, aside from the original two trilogies of Star Wars, it's probably my favorite trilogy ever. I could watch it all day, because of the extended cuts for, BVS Ultimate Cut and for Zack Snyder's Justice League. Technically being the original movie, but also being an extended cut and being the real movie. But it's like the people who talk about Lord of the Rings and the extended cuts of that. I have friends who watch that almost every other month. And that's kind of how I am with the Zack Snyder movies, right? But that's not what we're really just talking about. I just wanted to hit that up with the movie stuff. But when I was growing up, all the movies coming out were basically just, until Batman Begins came out, they were basically just nothing but Marvel. Whether it be Spider-Man from Sam Raimi, that whole trilogy, whether it be eventually the MCU, Daredevil, Punisher, all that stuff. I watched over and over again. I still do. The cartoons from when I was a kid. Yeah, we had Batman, we had Superman, we had the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons. But I don't remember many more for DC, as far as I can off the top of my head anyway. But most of the other cartoons I watched were, Marvel. Whether it be the Avengers cartoon that had like Cap and everybody, and Hawkeye, I think it made it like one season. Whether it be one of the first VHS tapes I ever owned of Spider-Man the Animated Series, which I love. It's probably my favorite cartoon ever, aside from Billy and Mandy. I don't know. But, I mean, again, Batman and Superman's animated series from the 90s, what is it? Bruce Timm, yeah, the Timm universe. Those shows are fantastic. They really are. The DC shows that come out in recent years, like Arrow and Flash, when they started out, depending on which season we're talking about, it was kind of an every other season was good type of situation. That's why I quit the shows. But those used to be things I look forward to every week. Every single fucking week. You have no idea. I was totally zoned in, recorded every episode I could. Marvel never really got anywhere with the TV show thing for me. Older shows, yeah, like the Bill Bixby Hulk. I bring that up a lot here lately on the channel. Newer stuff, I don't even bother watching. I can't bring myself to watch things like She-Hulk. I can't even bring myself to finish Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I made it through Season 1, which kind of got a little bit better, but was mostly fucking trash, and now it's not even like canon anymore, as far as I know. But let's go to the comic area. I really, really love comic books, and I've realized that over the recent years. I wish I had paid attention to them more as a kid, but they were getting higher and higher in price. I would have had to have dropped them by the time I got in my teens, but I didn't have like a local shop that was super close. It was at least a half an hour away from where I grew up. So, comics were already kind of dying when I was a kid, and then they really died like around 2016, and they're kind of just a walking corpse now. Sort of, kind of. There's stuff that I looked forward to, like Rebirth, that I read a lot of, especially with Batman. And like Doomsday Clock, I thought was cool. But outside of that, Marvel stuff has not appealed to me like at all in recent years. Maybe some of the Star Wars stuff here and there, they kind of died off a little bit. But like, I haven't read Greg Pak's Darth Vader. I think I read the first volume years ago when my wife and I still lived in an apartment when we first got married. But I kind of just stopped reading. I was doing a Goosebumps channel and stuff. I was too busy. And I was a lead too, so I didn't want to talk anymore. I had to talk all day to my team, so I didn't want to do that anymore, you know? But comic-wise, I really find myself leaning more and more towards DC, mainly because for me personally, with the things I read from DC, mostly kind of stuck to like Batman, some Superman here and there, events, that kind of thing. I really love that darker twinge, if that's a word, I guess, to DC's style, their tone. If Batman's in a scene, Batman is kind of almost corroding the scene with his kind of grimness, his inner turmoil, if you will. And I love that. But the interesting thing is there's more characters from Marvel that I love than in DC. Just because of my lack of exposure to DC. The Marvel characters I grew up with in so many variations with toys and cartoons and movies that, like, I have enough understanding of, like, even looking at a picture from a panel in a comic and being able to tell kind of which way they're leaning with whatever character they've got right there in front of me. But I know more and like more Marvel characters than DC, which is why it's strange to me. But I just think DC overall, with people like James Tynion IV and kind of off and on Tom King with his Batman run years ago for Rebirth, it's a fucking mess, don't get me wrong, but when he was doing good, in at least the eras that I liked of his story, I was totally down for it. I was buying trades left and right. They weren't too expensive yet. And again, events like Doomsday Clock. You have people like not James Gunn, dear God, Jeff Johns, who basically lives in the DC headquarters. He works on everything from TV shows to comics. He writes amazing stuff. I just love it. I know he's done some like Marvel too, but I love his DC work. I haven't read much of his Marvel stuff, but I've heard it's great. I think Jeff Johns did Avengers at one point, right? It was a big deal. But I really find myself loving the DC stuff, even game stuff that they did, like the Arkham games with Batman. Even the shitty ones, like Arkham Knight, were fun to play. But yeah, there's so much that DC has done. I mean, even down to the damn theme songs they developed for Batman and Superman with John Williams and Danny Elfman. All of that stuff is really what comes alive to me and makes you get into the world of, like, whether it be the Tim Burton Batman movies, whether it be fucking Batman and Robin, which, again, I like, because I grew up with it. There's just so much that's done with DC that's more of my personality taste. You know, I like darker things. I'm the one guy on the planet who thinks The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is his favorite Spider-Man movie. I know, it's not popular, but even with the Sam Raimi trilogy, I think the first movie's the best one. Everybody says Spider-Man 2 because you get the origin story out of the way. Spider-Man 1 was super dark. I loved it. It was great. Incredible Hulk. Really fucking dark, dude. Did you see how he killed Abomination in that? Wow. I love how dark movies can get with these different comic company adaptations. And even like Civil War, the movie ending. Dude, that was brutal. That was such a trip of an ending, man, with the reveal about Winter Soldier and stuff. To me, that was so groundbreaking because I was so into his character that, like, it felt like The Empire Strikes Back, because I saw it in premiere weekend, and it was like seeing that kind of Luke, I'm your father twist for the first time ever in a theater. It kicked my feet out from under me. And to this day, all of my friends that are normies that pretend to like comics and stuff, they're just like, oh, it's an okay movie. Motherfucker, you don't understand what happened there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some great stuff in there. But yeah, I lean more towards DC. I like their art style typically more for me. The storytelling. I really like exposure that I've had to some of the characters. I read quite a bit of Rebirth Green Arrow, and I even liked that. It had politics to it, but whatever. I can overlook that as long as the story was good, and it was, from what I read. I wanted to get into Flash. I've read a little bit of Flash. I want to read more Superman because I like Superman. I've read a shit ton of Batman. I've read probably the majority of the big Batman stories. I've read a lot of the event stuff. I've read all of the New 52 Batman stuff except for Detective Comics, because I really dig that stuff. There's just something about it that I find so special. And even though New 52 was a little grimdark, I know a lot of people aren't fans of that. I loved that. I did, and I like Rebirth too. I think it's good for what I read of it. My point is, I think there's a little bit of American classic nature that comes with DC. Because of Batman and Superman, and kind of Wonder Woman. I've never read anything Wonder Woman, except for things she appeared in, like Injustice. But I'm willing to jump into those things. I want to read more Green Lantern. I want to try out other heroes like Aquaman I've read a little bit of, and I really liked. Loved, even, the trade that I read. The first volume of Aquaman's New 52 was great. I want to experiment more with DC heroes that I've never had a whole ton of exposure to. But I find the writers for DC Comics, to this day, even though I don't really read any of the newer stuff, apparently I'm like 5 years behind. I didn't realize it was that long with the main storylines that go on. But I really love the way that the DC writing community kind of does their thing. I like what they do with the movies, you know? At least with the DCEU stuff, the Zack Snyder era of movies that we just stopped. But I love that stuff. I really do. But Marvel has great stuff too. You know, I don't prefer them. For example, like Spider-Man. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, not a fan of Spider-Man comics, almost at all. Great example. I just had a review go up, probably before this video, but it may be after, for an old story from like the 90s, before the Clone Saga, I believe, called Spider-Man Fear Itself. Fucking horrible. One of the worst graphic novel, one-shot, whatever, stories I've ever read in my life. And it kind of goes to show with comics, literally anything can be published. Like, no one gives a shit enough to have real quality, healthy quality control on anything. They just put whatever they want out there. That book was the definitive version of that. But I really don't find myself liking the majority of Spider-Man stuff I read. Very rarely do I like that. It's usually the kind of side things like Spider-Man Noir or 2099 that I dig. Or spin-off characters like Venom, for example, that I really dig, even though it's goofy most of the time. But like mainline Spider-Man, I think once Stan Lee really gets his footing, and I have some of the essential books from back in the day, once Stan Lee gets his footing, even black and white art that was clearly drawn to have a bunch of color, is really good stuff. Because of Peter as a character and how good Stan got that character, and even down to like Mary Jane, how he treated her. I really like that era, but it feels to me almost, most of the time, like Stan Lee is the only guy who ever really got Peter, which is weird because Peter is such a great, defined character, you know? In a way that, like, he transcends cartoons. He's like the Goku of America. You know what I mean? In a weird way. He kind of is. He's a character that really you couldn't get wrong. You know, no matter who wrote him. He's quippy. He's fun. He's adventurous. He tries to, you know, use some levity to break up horrible situations. And yet, I never find truly fulfilling stories that are just the mainline Amazing Spider-Man or Spectacular Spider-Man or the old Peter Parker, Spider-Man comics ever that are truly satisfying to me and my taste. Which is weird because I've been a lifelong Spider-Man fan. The animated series from the 90s perfectly did that. Sam Raimi did 2 movies and a third that was mildly entertaining, that really did that. The first Amazing Spider-Man, my favorite of those, really does a good job with that. I mean, even No Way Home was good for it. And you could argue Homecoming was too, for the MCU work. And yet, in the comics themselves, I very rarely like Spider-Man. I read a lot of the Dan Slott stuff, not all of it, for sure, not even most of it. There's a ton from years of working on that. Dan Slott is kind of hit and miss with me. I know a lot of people just straight out hate his work, and they wanted him gone for a long time, but dude, when I was in high school still, and he was still writing that book, the art would be worse to me than the actual writing of the books, because of how bad the art was. That's a big issue with Spider-Man books, too. I've never read any of the McFarlane stuff, but I've heard it's great. Maybe that's where I need to go. I don't know. But like the Clone Saga era, dude, I've been reading the fucking Clone Saga era since like 2018, before I had my back injury years ago. Still haven't finished it. I'm in the middle of like volume 1 of when Ben Reilly is finally doing his own thing. And I can't finish it. I just can't do it. It is probably one of the worst eras of comics I've ever read. And needlessly boring, needlessly trade after trade filled with side stories that don't fucking matter at all, and typically have bad art. And yeah, we all kind of debate that over the 90s comics in general having bad art, but like these are intolerable. These are truly made to have new toys come out because of all the new costumes and stuff, which is kind of cool in one respect, but most of the time it's unbelievably bad. Maybe it'll get better, I doubt it, but still. But like Iron Man, Matt Fraction's run, read a big chunk of that, if not all of it, years ago when I was, getting into comics more in 2018. Really loved that stuff. It was really good. I'm trying to find more Peter David Hulk stuff to get into in digital because I can't find it to buy cheap. So like it kind of, Marvel is very heavily dependent for me personally, and maybe this is for everybody depending on what we're talking about. It always comes down to who is working on that book. And I know that's common sense when we're talking about comics, but dude, to me, it's a bigger deal when it's Marvel versus DC. DC, it seems like they do a little bit better, for me, of either having writers return to work on a run again for a character they did a massively great run on back in the day, or they just have a way of finding a better compatibility. It's not always the case, but most of the time it seems like that for me and what I want from these books. But anyway, with all that being said, that's just kind of where I'm coming from on this stuff. I think DC, by the way, also has way better graphic novels because Marvel doesn't really do a ton of that anymore, for what I know at least. But like the events is another thing I need to talk about, I guess, before I end the video. DC events, like Doomsday Clock, for example, to me, I think they do a little bit better of an idea, at least with the newer stuff. I haven't had a whole lot of exposure to old events, of making it easier to get in and understand the story and have all the details you need. Whereas back in the day, like with Marvel, for example, I read Fear Itself just recently. I reviewed it. There's a lot that I don't grasp, or a lot that's so different in some respects that I'm like, I feel like I need more. Civil War, which came out, I think, before. Was that before or after Fear Itself from Marvel? Anyway, Civil War was a fucking horrible mess. If you did not read tie-ins, you didn't understand what the main point of that book was, or how deep the character choices and motivations were, especially with Cap and Iron Man in Civil War. But I think that's a big issue. That's an issue with comics across those big two companies. But to me, it's less of an issue for DC. Way less of an issue. For me, as someone who's relatively new still, somebody who comes in and out of the hobby, because I've been kind of jumping to manga more in recent years. And like I said, I was busy for years. I was getting married and reading Goosebumps and shit from my other channel. I was busy. So like I missed a lot of shit. So when it comes to events like the Three Jokers, for example, because of the quality of those writers, I was able to get in and understand what I was looking at and not have to know a million other things to get what was going on. And frankly, I think if events are designed to do that, just to grab in as much money as possible, I think it's kind of shitty to do that, to be honest with you. And it's a great example of why manga is killing American comics. But that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But it's true, though. Anyway, what do you think about Marvel or DC? Which one do you prefer? Once again, put it down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, your examples of why you feel one way or another. Go into all of the little obscurities you'd like to. I don't care if it's toys, the multiverse toys from McFarlane versus the Marvel Legends. I don't care what we're talking about. Discuss every bit of it, dude. I'd love to hear it all. Anyway, thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.